A specter haunts the face of Marxist theory, the specter of the MudPie argument. It was this central conundrum that Marx devoted his momentous work, Das MudPie. It has since haunted Marxist theorists of all persuasions. How can Marxist theorists go on in light of this devastating theoretical problem? If you spend any time reading about Marx's theory of value on the internet, you will probably come across some version of this asinine excuse for a critique called the MudPie argument. The basic style of the MudPie argument is similar to many advanced by those who know nothing about Marx's theory of value. One constructs a ridiculous strawman argument that has nothing to do with Marx, and then proceeds to knock it down with devastating brilliance, moral outrage, and a few clever asides about Stalinism. The MudPie argument goes something like this. Marx claimed that labor is what gives all commodities value. But what if I make a mud pie? This is the product of labor, yet nobody will buy it. It has no value. So take that, Karl Marx. The problem with this argument is that Marx was very clear that labor has to be useful labor to create value. Yet he didn't think that it was this usefulness that creates value. Labor has been doing useful things for millennia. All societies are made up of useful labor. Marx calls this useful labor that makes up a society social labor. The organization of this social labor differs from society to society. In a capitalist society, this social labor is organized through commodity exchange. The products of labor are assigned market values, and the fluctuations of these values coordinate the social labor process. This is a way of organizing social labor unique to capitalism, and it has all sorts of unique properties that other forms of social labor don't have. The usefulness of labor is not what is specific to capitalism. Value is. Hence, usefulness is not what Marx is interested in talking about. Value is. In video 4, we will look at why usefulness can't explain the amount of value a commodity has. For now, we will look at this more fundamental question. What does it mean for useful labor to take the form of commodity exchanges? The key difference between humans and animals for Marx is in the way they create their own worlds. Humans aren't slaves to their own evolutionary destiny, repeating the same patterns of survival over and over for millennium. Instead, humans actively shape the world in which they live. There is a certain creative aspect to human labor, in which we imagine the product of our work in our mind before we go about the work. But what distinguishes the worst architect from the best of bees is this, that the architect raises his structure in imagination before he erects it in reality. This world which we create forms the structure of our lived experience. We live in, wear, eat, and think about the products of our own creation. The structure of our social relations, from the way we relate in cultural and family groups, to the organization of production, to ideas about the world we live in, constitute a created universe powered by the creative power of human labor. Yet this world of our creation also acts back upon us. It structures both our desires and our means of attaining these desires. In much mainstream economic thinking, human desires and the means of attaining them are treated as universal, timeless things. Marx says the opposite. What we desire and how we go about getting the things we desire changes as the organization of our society changes. In this sense, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. In different times and different places, this organization of human activity has been radically different. The level of technological development, the organization of production, the organization of classes, and the shared conceptions about the world have all changed radically over time. It is the organization of these different modes of production and the way the organization of production affects the other aspects of society that was of interest to Marx. In essence, Marx is asking what this organization of production can tell us about a society. This means that Marx is not just interested in any labor. He is interested in social labor. Labor that is part of this mode of production, labor that goes into the makeup of a society. Useless labor, like the labor of a mud pie maker, is not social labor. The first step, then, in looking at a particular historical mode of production, is to ask how the private labor of an individual becomes social labor in that society. If you were a medieval peasant working a plot of land with your family, you would be laboring directly for your own use. There would be no mystery about whether the labor you were doing had use to your social group, or whether the right amount of labor was being allocated to the right tasks. The private labor you did on your land would be directly social. In a capitalist society, we don't produce things in order to use them ourselves. We produce things in order to exchange them in the market. We don't care about the usefulness of the things we are producing. We only care about receiving money in exchange for our labor. We then use that money to enter the market and buy the things we need for our own personal use. The production of a commodity and the use of it are separated in space and time. They are separated by value. They are linked by value. In order for our private labors to become social, they must first take the form of value. This is a very different type of social labor than in pre-capitalist societies. Rather than being directly social, capitalist labor is indirectly social. People don't directly decide what to produce. Instead, these decisions are made through the fluctuations of market signals, a constant back and forth of buyers and sellers. But these market signals aren't some autonomous power. They are composed of the aggregate individual labors of millions of separated producers. This separation of production and consumption means that our labor has both an individual value and a social value. The individual value is the amount of work that actually goes into making something. The social value is the actual amount of value the commodity sells for when it enters the market. Because producers are separated from each other by the market, because we have no collective control over production, we have no way of knowing for sure how much labor time society requires of us and what sort of labor it should be. We don't know what the demand will be for our product. We don't know how much of the product other producers are making. We have to guess these things. We only find out once the products of our labor meet the products of everyone else's labor in the market. This means that the individual value, the amount of time an individual puts into making a commodity, and the social value, the amount of time society requires go into it, can differ. If individual value and social value diverge, what does this mean? Some people think that Marx held that individual value had to equal social value. That if I spend 15 hours making a sandwich, then this has to be the value of the sandwich. But this is not at all what Marx argued. Marx wanted to show how individual values become social values in a market society. Unlike other forms of production in which we labor directly for use, in a capitalist society, we labor to produce value. Yet society must still use the products of our labor. We can't all make the same thing or all make useless things. Labor must be apportioned between the right tasks in the right proportions. Value is the mechanism that does this, since value is the only connection between individual laborers. Marx sought to explain how value acted as a force for the regulation of individual labor, turning individual labor into social labor. The fact that we discover the social value of our individual labor in the market creates the illusion that it is the market itself which is creating value. We bring the objects of our labor to the market, and there they are turned into money, making it seem like the subjective decisions between buyers and sellers are what create these money prices. This is what is being insinuated by the MudPie argument, that it is the subjective valuation of the usefulness of a commodity that determines its value, not the labor that goes into it. Yet this is an illusion, a fetish created by the fact that our labor is indirectly social.